All right, cool. So, yeah, you're just gonna see all of this mess. Maybe not the stain. That's okay. It's okay. So I'm gonna shower tonight, and I could just be making this video tomorrow so that I'm not showing my most sloppiest self. You don't say most sloppiest, do you? My sloppiest self on the internet, like with all my laundry and everything. But it's okay. I like being authentic on the worst side on the internet. So today we're gonna talk about the books that I read in January. This month I'm doing like another thing, which is I'm not setting a reading goal at all. I'm not counting how many books I'm gonna read. So I don't know how many books I have read in January. And I know I could just look over here and count the pile, but I'm not doing that. I'm just not doing it, you know? We'll see how far that goes. It's really annoying on Goodreads. Like every time I log on, it's just like asking me to put a number, and it's really frustrating. But it also means that it's not counting out of how many that I read, which is nice. So before we start, I hope you're all doing well, thriving in whatever way that might look for you. I decided to take off all ads on my videos, so none of my videos are monetized, and they will not be in the future either. I completely deleted my AdSense account, which is like how you earn money on YouTube. And I mean, I didn't earn that much, but it was like enough to get a coffee and cake every single month, which is a little bit. But instead, like if you like what I do here and you want to support me, I have a Ko-Fi where you can commission like profile pictures and artworks and just like donate money if you have any and if you want to. But I by no means am suggesting that you should substitute the money that I would have gotten from AdSense. The whole point of not monetizing YouTube is to not monetize it. So this is just if you want to. No pressure at all. Literally no pressure. I'm just telling you it exists. I read these books plus a couple audiobooks, but before I started this book, I forgot to mention a book that I read last month, actually, through audiobook called The 2000s Made Me Gay. This is a nonfiction about the author telling their story about growing up as like a millennial and all the media that they were consuming at the time and how that influenced like their perception of gay culture and gay society and seeing themselves as gay and like that kind of thing. So if you're a like millennial, lesbian, sapphic person, you have to like listen to this. The author reads it themselves. I really liked it. It's funny. It talked about like a lot of media that I've watched. A lot of it I didn't. I still haven't seen The L Word. I haven't seen Grey's Anatomy, but I've watched like Glee and a lot of the other stuff. So I just really enjoyed it. It was a good time. It's a very calming audiobook. And if you're like having a similar story as the author, like you're just gonna love it and relate to it a lot, you know? So that was last year. Now let's get into the books I read this year. I first did a little reading vlog where I read these two books, among others. It wasn't really supposed to be a reading vlog, but I did one anyways. This is And Then the Grey Heaven by Reed Katz. This follows Jules as they are grieving like their partner B, who recently died kind of suddenly. And the whole book is just about Jules's grief and kind of the community that they find. It's also about this other character, Theo, who comes and takes care of them even though they don't know each other. It's kind of flashing back and forth through what's happening now with Jules grieving and also telling a lot of stuff that happened in B's life. So you learn a lot about B even though they're not like alive in this book. On the back it says that Jules decided to like spread B's ashes and stuff, and that kind of comes later in the story. So it's not really the main plot, and it's a very short like sequence towards the end, but it's just really queer and really lovely. Like it was very healing for me at the time when I read this. I really needed to read this. I liked all the small cute like anecdotes that also were just like very, I don't know, just queer, you know, have those feelings. There are some kind of heavy scenes in this in many different ways, but there's one scene that Jules like refers back to where they are trying to be with B in the hospital, but you know, because the relationship is not on paper and B's family doesn't approve of Jules, like it's a little bit of a traumatic situation, you know, but it's a very good book, and also so like loving and healing and incredible. And I did give it 5 stars, but that was mostly just because it came to me at the right time. And I don't know if it's exactly a 5-star book, but definitely worth the read. I loved it a lot. And then I also picked up The Ecstatic by Victor Lavelle. So I originally gave this 2-star on Goodreads, but then I bumped it up to 3 stars because I was being a little bit hard on it, just because I expected it to be so good. I read Victor Lavelle's other book, The Changeling, which is, if you don't already know, it's actually the book I'm reading on my profile picture. You can't really see it because it's so tiny, the little icon, but I'm reading The Changeling by Victor Lavelle. So I was really excited to pick this up. The beginning is definitely a 4-star, then it was kind of leaning into like a 3-star, and then the ending was definitely a 2-star. The story kind of drifts apart and it doesn't make sense at the time. I don't know what the book was trying to say, but there is a lot of good small bits of commentary. So let me tell you what it's about. It's about, oh my god, me always looking at the back. It's about Anthony James, who is a horror writer, playwright, or he wants to be. But right now he has to go home and live with his family, and his family is his grandma, his mother, and his younger sister, as well as our main character, who is also like schizophrenic. And the book talks about the way like he experiences the world, and also being like fat. And the book talks a little bit about weight loss, but in a very strange, like surreal way. It doesn't like encourage anyone to lose weight by no means, but I would definitely look out for like those type of trigger warnings. It's very interesting to be inside his mind. Like the way it's written is very strange and very sporadic, and it's a very strange experience. In the beginning, I thought it was really cool, but once you get used to kind of like the weirdness, it becomes less interesting because I didn't feel it had so much more to it than that. But in the back, there's a little section where Victor explains how ecstatic was like a word used. It was like a word used in the 17th to 19th century to describe people those actions were impossible to understand. And I think that's pretty cool because it does explain the book and how I feel like I don't really get this book. I have been told by other reviewers on Goodreads that if you know about My Little Sunshine and you know the plot of that, then this is going to be less interesting. But I have a hard time imagining a movie that's like kind of cutesy relating to this book at all, because a lot of this stuff is very grim. I think my favorite part about this is like how the way that his schizophrenia is channeled is that sometimes he doesn't know, like the most obvious part of it is that sometimes he doesn't know if he's like speaking out loud or if he's thinking it, and the way that that just like casually shows up in the story when you read it is interesting and fun to read about. He's also a very witty character. He's a good character to follow. I don't know. I bumped up to 3 stars because it's not a bad book. I was just disappointed by the ending. Then I read My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. I buddy read this with my dad, and that was a good time in general. It was my first Stephen Graham Jones, my first horror in a very long time. This was an interesting read. You're following our main character, Jade, who is kind of like this rebel character, and she views herself like as such a badass, and she has a ton of like horror knowledge and history. And the book starts off with this Dutch like couple, I think, basically drowning or being taken into the river somehow. And when Jade kind of notices these signs of a horror movie like starting to play out in her little town, she tries to like warn the final girl about what's happening and that kind of thing. I'm kind of glad I read it, but I also don't know if I would have lost anything in my life or missed anything if I didn't read this. Like, it's written kind of like you're watching a movie, and it's not easy to follow, and it's not like a pleasant read to read. There was definitely times where like I was a little bit scared, and there's this one particular scene towards the end when the climax is kind of happening where she's like trapped in a tunnel of dead mooses or elk, and I'm sorry, that was so gross, that was so disgusting. But I gave it 3 stars. Like, it really wasn't bad, but I don't think it was for me. Like, the ending was both like expected and unexpected, but it's not exactly what I wanted, but it's also not what I didn't want, you know? Definitely trigger warnings for like a lot of stuff in this book. Like, please look it up. There's like suicide, alcoholism, discrimination, a lot of killings, obviously. I mean, trigger warning for maggots, honestly, because that was probably the worst part for me. Trigger warnings for essays, a lot. And it happens like, I think if you like horror movies and you have a lot of horror knowledge, like, I think I would enjoy this either way, just because of like all the horror references that are in here, which is not me. Then I listened to the audiobook for Crying in H Mart by Michelle, I don't remember her last name. This was one of the books that I kind of read because it was recommended to me by Helena. I don't remember the last name. It was like for the 12 books to read in 12 months. This is like kind of the book that I chose for this month. So I listened to it as an audiobook, and I do really recommend listening to it as an audiobook because Michelle reads it herself, and she has this like incredibly melancholy voice and tone that fits in so well with what she's saying. So like I highly recommend the audiobook. But I ended up giving it 3 stars. It like just really wasn't for me. Everyone said they cried so much like during like reading and listening to this. I didn't feel all that much. Like, it was just sad. Yeah, I'm really sad I didn't like it because I do really like memoirs, like that kind of stuff. But it was about the relationship of Michelle like with her mother who got cancer, and like their journey, and the story just like revolve around her illness and their relationship. And then it goes like back and forth in time and talks about everything leading up to her death. It talks a lot about like food and culture and how there's like so much around her mother's death that is so connected like to her culture and upbringing, that she's not really like only mourning her mother, but there's a lot of different elements around like her death and their history that is woven into telling this story. So the thing is, like, I do kind of think this was like a perfect book. And I think there's nothing Michelle could have really done differently for me to like it more. It just wasn't for me, in a way also. But I'm glad I read it because now I know what all the hype is about. The second reading vlog I did was this month was reading books that Molly by Moonlight had in her 2021 favorite books. And I'm not going to talk about them all together. I'm just going to go one by one. This is a short story collection called Sarahland by Sam Cohen. All the stories have something to do with the name Sarah, or people called Sarah in some sort of way. It's very gay, it's very queer. I liked it a lot. I think it was really creative. I loved how all the stories felt cohesive, yet it didn't feel like repetitive in any way. I thought they were creative and weird, and some of them kind of dipped their toes into like magical realism or speculative fiction, but they were all just like very, very current in my opinion. So like if you want to read this, I would recommend reading it like relatively soon, not because it references current events, but it just feels like very like a reflection of this time in the century, or whatever you can say. I liked it a lot. I gave 5 stars. Highly recommend it. Very glad I read it. Thanks, Molly. And then I read a comic. This is No One Returns from the Enchanted Forest by Robin Robinson. Imagine naming your child Robin when your last name is Robinson. Or maybe Robin chose that name, you know? It is kind of funny. So the art style in this is absolutely amazing. I will show it to you like this. I really like the colors. It's just like the perfect color scheme in my opinion. I really love the illustration. Like, it's just the aesthetics are really truly everything, and I like that a lot about this. I did give it, let me see, I gave it 3.5 stars. It drags on just like a little bit. I wish it was a little bit shorter. The story I think is quite beautiful and clever. It follows these 2 trolls. This is like the older sibling, and then this is the younger sister, and they're experiencing like earthquakes. Is it called troll? Are they trolls? I feel like they are goblins. Sorry, not trolls, goblins. I'm sorry if that was offensive. Goblins. They're experiencing like earthquakes in their little village, and when like their festival is about to begin, they can't have their little festival because of the earthquakes. And so there is like legends about like kind of Mother Earth or whatever. And so her little sister goes out on an adventure to try to like talk to Mother Nature and say like, basically, why are you doing this to us, you know? And she's so reckless and she has so much trust in the universe, but her older sister is like very worrisome and she's just very concerned and worries a lot. And so obviously she goes like after her sister, and on the way they meet this like other creature who helps her along the way. So I liked it. It was cute. I thought the world was very creative. It was just kind of like the story-wise, it was a little bit like on the middle ground. I think I kind of wanted to edit this graphic novel. That was like the feelings that I had while I was reading it. I feel like instead of calling it No One Returns from the Enchanted Forest, just call the book The Enchanted Forest. You know, like that's enough. And then during the whole book, there were like there was narrations of what the main character was thinking while she was in the forest and throughout the whole story. And it was unnecessary. Like we understood from the illustration and what they were talking about, like what she was feeling. And it was very like telling, not showing, or like doing both at the same time, which I thought was kind of annoying because we understand, you know, like you don't need to tell us like I am worried about, like we can see it on her facial expression and by the context, you know. And it just became a bit too much, and especially when it continues throughout the whole graphic novel. Like it's very common for comics and graphic novels to have a narration like introducing the world together with maybe a scene, and it's annoying to read if you've ever read it, because you have to read like the little boxes and then the bubbles, and you have to go back to the boxes, and they're following like two different storylines or in a way, or like conversations, and that was kind of the whole book. So I didn't like that. I would have just almost edited them out completely, and the small parts that would have been kept in, I would have made like a thought bubble out of those if there was a very important thought she was having. Otherwise, just take those away, and those are my reflections on it. But the art style is just so cute. And another book recommended by Molly, this is Chouette by Claire Oshetsky. So this follows a mother who believes that she's giving birth to an owl baby, or believes she is giving birth to an owl baby. And in the beginning, she doesn't want to have this child, but her husband convinces her. And then throughout the story, you see how the feelings of the parent shifts from her husband being the one wanting the child to the mother falling in love with her when she's born. When she's born, she is kind of disfigured and different from the other children. I mean, in the story, it's kind of told as if she is an actual like half human, half owl, but we can also read it as like some sort of analogy or metaphor for learning disabilities or physical and learning disabilities. But I liked it. I give it 4 stars. I thought it did what it was supposed to do. A lot of the scenes are very gruesome, like especially kind of the goriness of the animals. Like I would definitely say that this is a leaning on horror type of book. So yeah, definitely look up like trigger warnings for this too, because throughout the story, the dad tries really hard to change this child. He tries to like bring her to different doctors, try to fix her, and a lot of it just feels like very traumatic and hard to read about, because he just never loves her, and then he gaslights the mother, saying that she's the one who doesn't care about her, when the mother is the one who's actually taking care of her and loves her in a better way that the dad does. And it's really hard to read, made me really uncomfortable, which I guess is a good thing, and it was well written, and 4 stars. Oh my god, so many Molly books, I forgot about them. Then I also picked up Slug and Other Stories by Megan Milks. I think this has like less than 60 ratings on Goodreads, which is truly upsetting. It's really, really upsetting. And I don't get it. This was really, really good. It's a super creative, queer, speculative, transformative, like short story collection. A lot of the stories focus also, like in Sarahland, on gayness and especially trans maskedness, or lesbian and trans masks and sapphics and kind of like that side of queerness. But they are all really good. Some I definitely liked a lot more than others. But yeah, very creative. There's like a choose your own adventure. There's like a game side kind of story written in here. There is yeah, just a lot of creative like formats. There's some illustration things. There's a story about a bee and a flower that falls in love. And the first one, the one that's Slug, I can tell you the whole plot of it because I think it's like a perfect representation of this book. Basically, a woman in the beginning who has sex with a giant slug that comes through her window, and after they've had sex, she becomes a slug herself. And that's just kind of this whole book. There are tons of very animal transforming into humans and kind of that blurred line between like human and animal in like very sexual ways where you're reading them and they're like so sensual, but you're also really grossed out, but then you're like, I kind of like this and I don't know why because it is disgusting. And that was like my favorite part of this book. And I also gave it 5 stars and I liked it a lot. Or I gave it 4.75s, but basically a 5-star. And then I listened to the audiobook for Crippled, Austerity and the Demonization of Disabled People by Frances Ryan. This is a book specifically written about the economic and care discrimination in the UK specifically for disabled people, and it is a really hard book to read. And it's like, even though I know these things are going on, sometimes it like even shocks me even though I know. It's like when you hear specific cases about people who like really carry the brunt of these laws that are changed because the government needs to save money or they relocate funds, and when you read like specific cases of how that affects people, it just becomes like so much more upsetting. And a lot of people, maybe you're watching this, like are affected by these things. Yeah, so I wish the book was a little bit more intersectional. I wish it would have talked more about like what justification does the government have for taking away the funding, because it talks about how we're kind of going backwards when it comes to disability rights. And it's really like horrible. It's really horrible, but it's also really good to have this knowledge. And the audiobook was pretty good. I would recommend it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I gave it 4 stars. If you can and want to like show up for the community and, you know, like do stuff and be there, this is a great book to have this type of knowledge, to reach out to people and know where you're needed and that kind of things, in my opinion. And that's from my able-bodied perspective of this book. Then I also read The Discomfort of Evening by Marieke Lucas Rushnevel, translated by Michelle Hutchinson. So this is written by a Dutch author. I think it is autofiction, and it won the 2020 International Booker Prize. So I've been wanting to read this for a very long time. It follows a 10-year-old Jazz who lives with her 2 brothers, younger sister, I believe, and 2 parents. And in the beginning of the book, her oldest brother dies in the river, or he falls through the ice and dies of hypothermia? You know what I mean. And it just like is kind of a downward spiral from there when it comes to her family. It is quite a like gory book. It's also very intimate, and I think the author captured very well this age and the stuff you think about in this age, but it's still written like as an adult book, and I think the author did that really well. I think they told the story exactly how it was supposed to, but again, it was just too sad for me. Also, a lot of trigger warnings in this. Please look it up. My least favorite part were kind of like the sexual parts of this with the kids. And it's kind of weird even calling them sexual, because when you're this age, it isn't sexual. Like, you know how kids just like figure out new stuff about themselves and like explore the world and their bodies. And it's at such a young age that calling it sexual is like weird even. But I hope you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of scenes that just felt like really uncomfortable, and a lot of also like casual animal cruelty. And I do wish the author would have like gone deeper into that, because in the beginning I thought it would be a bit more about like the treatment of the cows and that type of like the part of the industry, but it never really went there. It just kind of explored instead like the main character Jazz's like obsession with death. So it was okay. Like, I think if this is your type of book, you will love it. But for me, it was just like a little bit off in many different areas. And the last book I managed to read is How to Resist Amazon and Why by Danny Kane. So Danny Kane owns a bookstore in Portland, I believe, called the Raven Bookstore. Oh yeah, and also the store says the fight for local economies, data privacy, fair labor, independent bookstores, and a people-powered future. I thought this was really good and really important. I did give it 4.75 stars. The one thing I would have changed is that it's a bit repetitive. And it's really short, so it really shouldn't be that repetitive. Like, there's some points he keeps touching on again and again, but also because they are connected to, like, other things that he talks about. So I do understand why he repeats certain stuff. But it was just, like, for such a short book, I really wish that it would have been more to the point. But I also really enjoyed this. A lot of stuff I already knew about Amazon, but some of it, like, really shocked me. And it's a little bit scary reading this, to be honest, but it's also really cool to hear it from, like, a bookseller. The thing is, like, Amazon is both, like, a market and a seller, which is the biggest problem with Amazon, because there's a lot of stuff where, like, Amazon is a market and people can sell their stuff on there, but because you're putting stuff on there, like, Amazon has the right to basically steal your products and create these same products and then give them off at a better price, so that you're competing at a market where people and the market is also competing with you, but you're all in the same market. I hope that makes sense. And so the book talks about that, and it also talks about how, like, booksellers are so dependent on Amazon, because if you're not on Amazon, then you can't, like, compete in, like, the book industry, for example, and how Amazon have in the past, like, denied, like, books to be sold there because of, like, personal beef and that kind of thing. It talks about how Amazon creates, sponsors, like, companies outside, like delivery companies and stuff that are basically funded and everything by Amazon, but because it is not Amazon, they can say that everyone gets fair labor who works for Amazon, but that doesn't count for third-party companies that they or second part. I don't know what I'm saying. The words are jumbled. I hope you understand what I'm saying. But they can claim a lot of stuff about fair labor when the things that they are saying are only under the really small umbrella, and it says nothing about everything that Amazon actually has an influence over, which is horrible. And there's a lot of stuff about this, just really good, and I did really like reading it. And I still have my Amazon account. I probably order maybe 2 things from Amazon a year. I still use Audible. I know that's a big one that I wish I could get rid of it, but the thing that Audible does is that it, like, you don't own any of the audiobooks. So if I get rid of it, I don't get access to anything there ever again. And my Harry Potter books are on there. So if I delete my Amazon, then those will disappear and I'll have to re-buy the Harry Potter books. And I mean, I don't want to support J.K. Rowling again, but is that as bad as supporting Amazon every month? You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I had a really bad experience with the last package I got from Amazon, and so I will be deleting my account as soon as I can. This book really inspired me to do that. And I also want to say, I'm like the least probably judgmental person you'll ever meet. That's probably not true. I'll be in there of one of the least judgmental people you've ever met, because I really don't care what you do with, like, where you get your stuff, and because don't have your life, I don't know what you need, what your needs are, what makes your life better. Like, so I'm not judging absolutely anyone for having an Amazon account, like, whatsoever, you know? Like, the people who need to do something about this are, like, the people working at Amazon and, like, Jeff Bezos. I mean, you know? So it's not, like, the people who need Amazon's problem to, like, try to do this. But there's a lot of people who use Amazon that have the possibility of having other options, and, like, those are the people that I wish, like, would really read this. And I mean, this is just good stuff to know, obviously, but, like, there's a lot of people still using Amazon that don't need to use Amazon, and I know, because I know a lot of those people. Okay, that's it. I'm not judging anyone for using Amazon, you know? That's, like, it's not the job of the people who need it the most to be responsible for the horrible actions of someone who has like one of the richest people in the world. Is he the richest? Probably. Yeah. But I think the book did that well too, and it didn't like blame the costumer. And I like that. So these books plus these audiobooks and this other audiobook that I read last month I forgot about. Oh, it is February, so I mean like 2 months ago, December. These are the books that I've read recently, talked about this video. I hope you enjoyed this. Also, I want to show off my cup that says, God is a trans femme, with loads of coffee stains on it. This is by Wednesday on Instagram. I will link their shop down below because I really like their stuff. And I hope you enjoyed this messy long video about the books that I read, and I will link everything down below, like my Instagram, Ko-Fi, Storygraph if you want to follow me there. I'm not really using Goodreads anymore. And I wish you all an amazing, brilliant day. I hope February is like so good to you. And like, yeah. Bye.